What up, everyone? Welcome to episode 27 of Coffee and Commerce. As always, most of the time, actually, we've got our chairman and CEO of VaynerX, Gary Vaynerchuk, with us.
Hello, everyone.
And today we've got the reverential, brilliant, a true gentleman, incredibly successful gentleman, Brandin Cohen, the founder of Liquid IV. Thanks for joining us, Brandin.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Real quick, Zubin, I apologize, but the chat is off and running. I need to address two things that were chatted about right before we started. Christian Reza, please tell your wife I'm sorry she doesn't like me. My stance on college actually is not that extreme. It's a very narrow stance, which is there's so many kids that collect debt for a diploma that isn't practical in a 2021 world. And I think a lot of people should go to college, especially if their parents pay for it or if it's a full ride. It's a fun vacation. But yes, I think things are changing, and I apologize. I want to meet her. Following up to that point, when he said my wife doesn't like Gary Vee because of the college thing, 1995, Yada said, Gary Vee thinks he's better than other people. He's a douchebag. Of course your wife hates his guts. Yada, ironically, please do not confuse my conviction for my belief that I think I'm better. As a matter of fact, it's the reverse. I actually think I mean nothing, and that if I die tomorrow, I'll have 12 hours of good talk on Twitter. Brandon will say that I was a good mentor and said a couple smart things. Zubin will say I was but like, I believe I mean nothing, but I have conviction in what I believe. And I'm sure that comes across sometimes, Yada, as that I think I'm better. I actually think I'm worse on the record. BC, good to see you, bro. Zubin, sorry, it was fun. The comments part of Coffee and Commerce is my favorite part. But what my second favorite part is the guests. And this young man, and if you're watching, this very handsome young man has pulled off one of the great executions in direct-to-consumer in the last decade and deserves the floor. And I'm excited about that. And I know, Zubin, you can ask the best question. So here we go.
Let's go. Brandin, tell us about yourself. Tell us your story, and then we'll get into it.
Oh, man, I'll try and give the short version. But yeah, I grew up great family, middle-class family. I was big into sports, so I played like 3 sports in high school. Ended up getting fortunate enough to get a golf scholarship to play in college. It was always my dream and goal to be a professional golfer. My sort of in my last couple of years, I had some injuries and got a little bit burnt out. And so that was sort of like my first failure in life. I had always just blocked everything else out to make this dream come true. It didn't happen. And I was kind of at the end of school, like, hadn't really paid much attention in school. And I was like, what am I going to do? Love sports. So I went to go work for the Arizona Diamondbacks. I got a sales job. I was making 100 phone calls a day. Which was actually sort of a blessing. I just learned so much about people and rejection and things that ended up paying off later on in business. And when I was out there, I became friends with a lot of the guys on the team. So I was, 22, 23 years old, and they were all drinking Pedialyte, the baby hydration drink. I was always into like health and optimization and being at your best in order to perform, whether it was in business or in school or in sports. And I just thought it was silly that the best athletes in the world were drinking a drink that was designed for little kids. And so I started studying the science of, it's called oral rehydration therapy, which I won't get too sciencey, but when you mix sodium, glucose, and potassium, it helps water absorb in your bloodstream much, much faster. And it was actually being used by the World Health Organization, the science, in underdeveloped countries around the world to save lives from dehydration. So when I learned about all this, I was like, what other products are leveraging this here in the United States and helping, adults, live their best life. And at the time, like about 10 years ago, there was nothing. And so I told my parents I was moving home and I was going to go get my MBA. And it gave me about a year to study. And when in reality, I was starting the business. I got the business off the ground in the library where I went to college. I just sat in there for hours upon hours, got the business off the ground. And then
see,
how many years ago was this?
See, there's good usage for college. See,
I leveraged their library. That's exactly right. Yeah, so it gave me a year to sort of get some wings because I just knew my parents probably wouldn't be, they would always support me, but the more traditional path was more comfortable, obviously. So when I finally told them, they still wanted me to go. So I applied I got into schools like NYU, Boston College. I deferred for a year and it gave me another year to work on the business. And by year 2, I had investors, a few angel investors wanting to give me money. And the investor said, you can't go to school. You need to run this full time. I'll pay you a small salary, which then gave me the leverage to say, hey guys, I'm not going to go to school. So I have a really slow growth story. Everyone thinks we were this like overnight success, but from 2012 to 2018, we did under $1 million in sales in total. We got into Whole Foods in 2015. I would sell one stick at a time every weekend. I would sell it in and then go sample and demo product by myself. I'd go to local health stores, grocery stores, liquor stores. I would tell the owner, I had one newspaper article that they wrote about us. I said, put this on your shelf. They'd put it on by the front for free. I said, here, just take it for free. If it sells, call me next week. And I would have all my friends go buy all the stores, and then they'd send me Venmo requests and I'd pay for it. So I was losing free product and paying for it myself. And it wasn't because it was a mini growth hack, but essentially when people tried it, they loved it. But you have to have the marketing and backing to give it some time to get off the ground. And so those few weeks and that first impression with these store owners allowed them to then like it. And it gave me time to actually get real marketing going. So yeah, the sort of the end story to take you to now is like from 2012 to 2017, 18, we did under $1 million in sales. We then quickly jumped to 3.
Brandon, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I mean, this is amazing, right? And it's funny because Gary and I were talking to the hundreds a couple of weeks ago, and they did exactly the same thing. First time they got into retail, they got their friends to go and buy. I don't think they Venmo'd them, so maybe they owe them some money for that. But tell us about something. 2012, 2018, 17. You did $1 million in total revenue, but you kept going. What kept you going?
I get asked that question. I think I just
Hold on, I apologize because I know it's a Brandon question. Did you say $1 million?
In total, in combination of 5 years, we did a total of under $1 million in revenue. And by the time really, the reason I'm jumping in and Brandon's going to have a way better answer, I jumped in not to interrupt him. I jumped in to flatter him because he's a real businessman and entrepreneur. And this is an important moment. This is my only moment to shine, so I had to jump in. We live in a framework now where people are using these proxies that are not real. How much money did you raise? There's so much money being printed. The trillions that America just printed for stimulus is now in the market. Where do you think that's going? There's so much money. Why did he keep going? Because he didn't go out of business. Kept it alive. And
because he liked it.
Yeah, I love it.
Sorry, go ahead.
I believe, the hard part is if you play the comparison game, right? Like we have some mutual friends and I'll get into how we got into direct to consumer later, but I have direct to consumer friends like Jake from Movement and other guys like that who did, they went from 3 to 75 million in their first 4 years. And in my first 4 years, we had just surpassed 300,000 in revenue, right? So if you're playing the comparison game, it's a lot different, but I believed in what we were doing. I loved what I was super passionate clearly about what I was doing. And so we built such a foundational business where it was so strong from the bottom. It was grassroots. We had sticks in people's hands. We had an incredible culture. We grew it the right way. We didn't raise a lot of capital at all. That by the time we actually had this hockey stick start to happen in 2018, 2019, we went from under $1 million to hundreds of millions, by the time we got acquired in 2020.
Well, I think that's exactly it, right? Like what Gary was saying, what you were saying. The comparison game and what people are hearing out there is what fucks people up, where they go, I'm only doing 200,000 in revenue. Fuck that. I'm going to go do something else. I'm not making any money. But to your point, and I did the same thing until we had our exit with Gary and company, like it was a very slow growth. And my entire point, as yours, Brandon, and Gary's, was like, I just want to keep this thing afloat because I know I'm building something and I don't care if I'm making any money right now. I mean, I did want to make money. I had other people who were making a lot more money than I did. But I'm like, the fact that I can keep this thing going, like what I would look at is like, I've got enough business to be able to support payroll for the next 6 months. And that was my thing. It wasn't like I'm going to take money out of this.
Yeah. I invested in Brandon's company a couple of years ago, and it was the only investment I made in like a 2-year period because I'd stopped investing. And we met. Yeah. And I remember literally in my head saying, I'm going to regret not doing this. This is because I stopped investing because I realized what I was doing wrong, which was I was investing in companies, and I promised myself I was done with that. And I was going to go back to why I invested in Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr when I was on fire, and why the mistake I made with Travis on Uber is I became a VC instead of Gary Vaynerchuk. And I said, I'm going back, and it's going to happen with TikTok, with Mick Mac, with Rachel. right? That one I invested in the human. And I remember I'm 20 minutes in with Brandon, and I meet a lot of high energy, excited about their business people. I'm one of those people. And the reason people have cynicism for me is the reason that a lot of people passed on Brandon too, is you don't really know when you meet that energy if this is the 8 out of 10 completely full of shit one, or the 2 out of 10 like, fuck, this is a big one, right? And I remember being in the meeting and asking some business, I just remember it. I actually, the Maya Angelou thing, you remember what you feel now, like couldn't tell you a word of the meeting, can tell you everything my body felt. And I was 100% positive, and I invested, and it's what I want everybody, because I'm reading the comments. Please love your game. Because if you love that's why I think I got emotional when you said what kept you going. I'm like, he had no choice. He liked it too much. Of course, outside validation didn't matter. He liked it too much. He liked it too much.
Yeah.
He believed in his mission. He liked it too much, and he was capable enough. He didn't go out of business. A lot of people like it and go out of business. And most people are doing it for all the wrong reasons. Like for everybody who's in here right now, trying to be an entrepreneur, wanting to be an entrepreneur, please, do it because you like it so much. A lot of people in the comments right now saying some unfortunate news. It's now confirmed that DMX has passed, right? The reason people are so emotional about DMX is he had passion for his thing as an artist. And you feel that. There's a lot of people that go into the rap game for the money, just like entrepreneurship. And I think for a lot of people right now, like if you truly love your game, then you won't worry if you have a blue check mark. You won't worry if you have 1 million followers. You won't worry if you're doing $1 million. You just won't. You won't. It's like skiing. Do you play golf? Like I use golf and skiing a lot. Brandon played golf for a lot of different reasons, but like most people play golf because that's the thing they choose to do. That's their escapism. They like it. Do you ski? Because they escape. They like it. They swim. They play tennis. They go out at night. They go to the club. They watch sports. They play video games. For me, I'm trying to push the conversation of, can you make that your business? Because if you feel the same way about going skiing for a weekend as you do waking up Monday morning for your thing, which is how I live my life, and I see it in others, everything changes. All the good shit happens.
Gary, we talked about it on your podcast, but from that story of you carrying your friends like wine out to their car. And like, for me, it's similar, not as physical as that, but it wasn't even like, I wasn't worried that all my friends who had their college degrees and were making $100,000 a year and going on vacations and stuff, I was so tunnel vision and I was so passionate about what I was building. And I just knew somehow I was going to win. I wasn't going to not win. Right. And so the tunnel vision is what allowed me not to play the comparison game too much. And I loved it. And I knew we were going to figure out a way to win. And I think we talked about it. You had the same exact feeling.
I totally understand. Zubin?
No, I'm remembering now, and I think this is a good lesson for everyone else, where there's opportunity. You got to strike while the iron's hot. Brandon, in January 2018 in Vegas, we met. I think at the same time you met as well, Gary. The three of us were there. And then Brandon talked to me and goes, hey, man, I've got this opportunity. Do you want to invest? And I didn't follow up, and I didn't invest. So Liquid IV is my Travis Uber story.
I love it. Eat it, Zubin, right in your fucking mouth.
I fucking eat it every day. but I'm blessed
it's
to know
best.
Brandon as a human.
It's the best.
And just the way Travis, right? Like that's what it's about. Like at the end of the day, there are opportunities to come and go.
Oh, it's so much more fun to tell that story from the losing side than the winning side.
For you it is.
for you it will be too, because you're a young man, you're brilliant. We have a great friendship. There will be many, 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 many more opportunities.
Brilliant.
Brandon, tell us a little bit. You mentioned something that I want to focus in on. Folks that you were friends with, folks that you were spending time with, started direct-to-consumer businesses and had an hockey stick instantly, right? You went a different path. You went down a retail, big box path, and it brought different things with it, right? Tell us about that approach and why that was different and in many ways better than going straight direct to consumer.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways to win, right? And for me, I just knew my skill set, right? Like I wasn't like a developer who was like amazing at running Facebook ads. Like that just wasn't my skill set. I was a people person. I developed some incredible relationships through sports. I developed an incredible relationship with someone Gary knows, Scott Emerson, who plays the big box game as well. And so it was just sort of, I matched what I knew I was good at, which was going to these retail meetings, explaining to them why our product would work. We were this total white space. They'd never heard of a hydration category. They wanted to put us in sports nutrition or diet or beverage. And I was like, I don't care where you put us. I'm going to drive people into the store and they're going to buy the product. And so, yeah, I mean, it worked well for us based on my skill set as the leader, because I knew that we could win that way. And so we built the business super grassroots that way. And then what was so cool is, my dad always says aces and spaces. Like my aces was getting these big box relationships, figuring out how to raise the proper amount of money to support inventory to launch. And then I found experts like you guys. And that's when I called, I met you guys in Vegas and I sat with Gary there and I sat with you, and you guys came in and ran, built our website, and Gary's team helped run all of our DTC. And so, of course I knew enough to be dangerous in that area, but like I picked what my sweet spot was. And then I found experts around me to build that up. And what was so cool is like, because we had done it that way, by the time we did go direct to consumer and Amazon, which was a big part of it, there was all these people who had already tried the product. So it made the acquisition costs and everything, they dropped a lot because of that. And the other thing is like, what was so cool about building such a well-rounded business and not being so one-dimensional, whether it was only in store or online. So for example, when COVID hit, we didn't know what was going to happen. It was March of 2020. The world turns upside down. All retail shuts. That was half, that's a lot of our business. But we had a huge Amazon business and direct consumer, and all those customers started buying online. And then once stores opened up, like Costco, which was a big customer of ours, that business went right back up to where it was or higher. And our direct consumer business never dropped. So our plan in 2020 was a massive growth plan. We were going to double our sales in 2020. And what we ended up doing in 2020 was double our aggressive growth plan. And it was because we had this omni-channel business that was so foundational. And we weren't just one dimensional. We focused on being balanced. And there were so many people in the beginning of the business who were like, only focus on one type of customer. You can't market to everybody, and only focus on one channel. And I was like, I hear you. The textbooks say that, but Liquid IV is for everybody. And I believe I'd rather grow it slowly over 10 years and have all these channels. So when shit hits the fan like COVID, when all these businesses don't know what to do, we had all these things to balance the business out. So I'm grateful. I trusted my gut and went with, it's for everybody, and we're going in all channels, which not necessarily is the smartest thing, but it worked really well for us.
I'm a big believer in that, Zuby. And I think early in my career at Wine Library, somebody said to me, Gary, the wine business is around selection, price, and service. And to be successful, and this was the guy who had the biggest distributor company, hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm 22 years old. It's our first lunch meeting. And he goes, you got a lot of talent. Know your dad for a long time. And because I've been in the store since I was 14. This is me kind of like coming of age. He goes, you're going to have to pick 2 of the 3 to be successful. I didn't say anything. 6 years later, there's like this huge New York Times article written about me, like building the biggest wine store in the country, so fast, kid. And I told the story, and I didn't mention him by name. And I said, and I remember him saying that, and I remember walking back to the store because it was close to the store and saying, that's the stupidest advice I'd ever heard. Why won't I just deliver on price, service, and selection? The guy wrote me a letter. He goes, read the article. It's unbelievable. He goes, I have a bad feeling I know who that person was. Congratulations. And I think the point there that Brandon was making for a lot of people in the chat right now or listening after we record this, too many people listen to people that have done it before them. The market changes. People are different. People have different strengths and weaknesses. Dynamics change. The context has changed. One of the reasons that I don't think I share my passions, I don't think that I'm giving advice or should be listened to. Why? Because there's too many nuances on the person on the other side of it. For me to actually give advice is when me and Brandon actually spoke. Zubin, when you and I actually have meetings, give me all the context. I'll do the best I can to give good advice, pattern recognition, good intent. But Gary Vee, the character, I'm trying to share my passions and hypotheses and general nuances that I see, but it's not actual advice because the human on the other side of it needs to give too much context for that story to be advice. And for everybody who's listening, me, everybody else in the world, your parents, Brandon, Zubin, like you have to contextualize it to you, but you have to contextualize it from optimism, not from like excuses to why not. Because then when you're being cynical and being in no culture or negative culture or spewing negativities, your game is over already.
And I don't think it's bad to listen to people who have done it before. Like I listen to a lot of people who have done it before. I think the key to that is to put it through your own filter.
Correct.
And contextualize it for yourself and say, hey, that was from this generation. What from that relates to me? And then sometimes you listen and use all of it. Sometimes you use none of it. And I think that's why like people always ask about mentors. I think they're great, but you have to contextualize it through yourself and your filter and your life or your business,
Yep.
Absolutely. I think that that it's really interesting. We, in some ways, when you look back at the Liquid IV journey, now with exit, and we'll get there in a moment. But if you look back like the first 5, 7 years, 8 years, you're like, look, it's a slow burn. Everybody's going fast. But I think one of the things, and there's a lot to be learned here for everyone who's tuning in. One of the things that we were blown away. So as an agency, we met with a bunch of different brands, right? That were at a certain point, they wanted to blow up their direct to consumer, et cetera. So we meet with them. Robbie Deeks and I walked out of the meeting with you, Brandon, and we're like, fuck, this is really interesting because they have the kind of the expertise, the energy, everything around all these direct to consumer brands we meet with. But what they have that many of those don't have is like operational wherewithal. They've shipped millions of products. They've done this. They've fucked up from a supply chain standpoint. They've gone through all that. Where like so many of these brands that just go hockey stick up, I mean, you all know, they will run out of inventory. They won't have this. They won't have that. There's so many issues that happen that like you had a legit business. You had a solid business once you decided to like focus in on direct to consumer. Again, my point isn't that everybody should do that. It's not for everyone, and they won't be able to succeed, frankly, if they want to do that. But your ability to do that gave you kind of a moat, created that moat for you, and gave you an advantage that others didn't have. And I think that's really the interesting part. That it's like, to your earlier point, take whatever path you want, but understand that at the end of the day, and this is what everyone's realizing, that it requires a multi-channel approach to be successful.
But I will say this for people who are listening who are very early in their journey, Brandon's capability for that kind of distribution and then that street dirt 4 years of entrepreneurship to make it successful box by box, because he was scaling unscalable behavior, is really the only way to win big box. And that's if you're even lucky enough to be able to get into big box. So the reality is that 97 to 98% of the people listening right now are going to start DTC. And to your point, Zubin, I think this still keeps coming down to just Brandon's a good businessman. And Rachel's a good businesswoman at McMack. And like, I hope we get back to that. It's not just about raising money, doing Facebook arbitrage, like the conversation of being a good businessman or woman. I'm almost starting, I can't believe what I just said. I'm starting to realize I'm thinking about the same way I don't use hustle anymore because it's been manipulated. And now I use work ethic as one of the things that matter. I'm starting to think that I'm going to start using businessman and woman more than entrepreneur, because I think the word's been manipulated and understood to be something else. Like, you have to be good at business. This is business.
Yeah. I mean, you guys have been through it as much as anybody, but there's so many dark times or hard times where if you didn't have that extra gear inside of you to go win, it would have felt folded over. And that's why, even as I'm getting hit up now all the time for different investment opportunities, it truly, and hearing you say that actually helps me, because I'm kind of trying to figure out my own thesis with that. But it comes down to the entrepreneur or the businessman and woman who are leading it, because it's just that little extra bit of effort, waking up at 4 a.m. to whiteboard, like whatever it is to figure that thing out. Like, that is the win. Like, this category wouldn't have existed without the sort of the obsession.
And two things, Uzi, DTC stands direct to consumer. It's a term we use in e-commerce. And Brandon, that's what goes back to my earlier point, which was you're not waking up at 4 o'clock if you're doing it for the Lambo. You're not calling a customer and apologizing and driving to their house and saying, sorry, if you don't worry about your reputation because you're gonna do business forever. Like, this goes back to tried and true, good, kind, real, authentic realities of life that will be the sustained model in the supply and demand of as many businesses that are out there. And I think that I just can't get this out of my stomach anymore. If you don't like it, you're not going to pull it off. And yes, do some people frantically that chase money pull it off? They do. But I know those people. You know what happens? They become even more miserable with the money. They start doing terrible shit. You know this, Brandon. You run in the LA circles. Like, it's Star Wars. There's the Jedis and the dark side, and both can win to a point. But Jedis will always win, so they can have sustainable lives, right? The dark side, that's about it for the money. They do it for the insecurity. They can pull it off too because that energy's high. Darth Vader's fucking powerful. But what happens is when they get the bag, it gets really dark. It does. And that's what I don't want. Like, there's people here who may say, Gary's full. I hear it. I hear it from the dark Jedis. Like, fuck Gary, he's too foofy. I get drilled on both sides. Gary, is like, I'm losing on both sides. Like, he's too entrepreneur. On the other side, the entrepreneurs are mad at me because I'm saying too much foofy shit. And I'm just like fucking lonely out here. But I'm like, fine. But like, it gets bad, Brandon. It gets bad. Like, when I heard of your exit, I felt such calmness. I'm like, that's a base for a lot of good stuff. I've seen some exits to contemporaries, acquaintances, investments, even lightweight friends, and I go into immediate anxiety because I know the next 2 years is going to be not good. And I just hope they can get out of it. And I've had those combos and they don't want to hear it. It's hard.
Yeah.
Look, I think that two thoughts. One, it's cliche to say it's about the journey, not the destination, but anyone who's done sales, anyone who's done anything like that, to Gary's point, you'll realize at a tactical level, you get super excited right before the sale, you get that sale, and then what? Right? That adrenaline rush is gone because you're not enjoying the every day of it. And then you're going back down into a valley and then you got to go back up. So look, it's about sustainable happiness. I think going back to your point, good businessmen, good businesswomen. And I think that if we're talking about, again, Rachel and Brandon, what you realize very quickly is that they're good people, that they're good, solid characters, they have solid business fundamentals. So to Gary's point, it doesn't matter where they start, D2C, big box, whatever, they get business, they work hard, but they're solid characters. And so, yeah.
And they have that gear.
Oh yeah.
That gear that I call, it's that scene in the movie where like the hero gets punched in the face hard and you think he's going to get like knocked out or knocked out. And they kind of like go there and they spit out the blood and maybe even a tooth and they look back at you. And then the bad guy is like, oh, fuck. That's the thing I'm looking for, right? I knew in that moment in Vegas that if Brandon got punched in the fucking face, he would spit the blood out, spit the tooth out, look back at you and be like, now you're in fucking trouble. I felt that about Rachel. I feel that about myself. And I think that's that little thing right there. That's the weird one. That's the 9-figure exits, the 10-figure exits, the 8-figure consistency business that kicks, like, this is sports. This is fucking sports.
Frankly, like that, when that moment happens, and in 2020, there were a lot of those, there's some weird thing inside of me. Like, I think a lot of good leaders and entrepreneurs, when things are going good, can roll with the momentum and keep it going. But there's something when like the greatest challenges hit us, like in March of 2020, or, during the summer of 20, the whole year, where like some extra thing happens where I'm like, now it's time for me to even step up more and make sure I lead my team and bring positive light to our community. Like, that is the moment where the actual real winners step up the most. There's a Martin Luther King quote about like in times of, in easy times, anyone can lead through it. It's the times of darkness and despair where true character comes out. And I think that is that extra gear. If you can see that in someone, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
I think it's very cool. I got to run to another live thing. Thank you, team. I'll let you continue. Bye, everybody who's watching.
Just to give everyone a sense, Brandon, I think like Gary and I keep talking about you and your character, but people listening and don't know you. I think one thing will give them a clear indication. How much more did it mean to you to make so many people that are your close friends and family, to make them winners, to make them kind of financially successful from your exit? How much more did it mean to you for that to happen than for you to become financially successful out of it?
Yeah. Personally, for myself, I was doing it because I wanted the business to win. But the thing that was probably the most gratifying, which has taken me literally 6 months to sort of like comprehend and get my feet on the ground, is, I had 80 friends, family, investors like Gary, but I had like, my mom, my sister, my dad, close friends who had no money, who gave me like $5,000 in the beginning of the business, like whatever they had to give me. And 5, 6 years later, that turned into a 7-figure check or more, right? And so I honestly, because I was going through my own transition, it's like a very sort of extreme transition, right? I lived in an 800 square foot apartment for 7 years, and then like we get the sale and I'm able to buy a house, and it's just this really weird dynamic. It's hard to comprehend. But when I think about like one of my goals, not to get too much into my family background, but my parents were divorced, and my mom, my goal was always I wanted to get her a house that she would love. And so with the sale of the company, with the proceeds she made, and then me being able to help her, we got her this, awesome house that she now loves and she's comfortable in. And, she's not in this small apartment here in LA anymore. And like, that was probably, of all the things, that was one of the most meaningful. And then the other one is like, when I look around and like probably the 15 or 20 people in my closest circle who were connected to the Live leadership team, my family, my friends, literally everyone's buying a house. Not that that's like anything, but it's the most tangible thing to be like, wow, all that ridiculous hard work allowed like my close circle to be able to like, see out this dream that they all had to be homeowners. It's just really cool. It's just one example, but it's like, for me, it's the most tangible, where I can like comprehend what all that 9 years of hard work equated to for all these people who believed in me when they probably shouldn't have.
Well, they believed in you because they knew why you were doing it. They believed in you because of everything Gary mentioned. And ultimately, that, like, what you were able to achieve with the folks that you worked with for everyone around you is what'll keep you happy forever, right? That's your sustainable happiness. That's what I think. Again, people like Gary are incredibly well attuned to understanding other people. Like Gary's thing, I think one of the things that his biggest strength, if you ask me, is his ability to quickly make an informed opinion about somebody, whatever that opinion is, right? But he gets an understanding because he sees so many people. He's got so much pattern recognition in that sense that he sees it. He saw that in you. He wasn't investing in anything else. He invested in this because he knew that. And ultimately, I think like the point I'm trying to drive here is that it's more than just that exit. It's more than just that growth. It's about that journey. And it's about ultimately, once you get that exit, not what it can do for you, but what it did for everyone around you that'll keep you happy forever.
It's true. It's true.
What do you think about your upbringing led you to caring so much about making those around you successful?
Yeah, I think about it a lot because, I've been reading just a lot of books on like some of the, best leaders or entrepreneurs of all time, like, Benjamin Franklin or Albert Einstein or Elon Musk. Mm-hmm. Like you read these biographies about like how they became who they are. Right. And I'm like, how did I become the way I am? I'm like so curious. And so I've just been so fortunate. My parents, they loved me a ton, which I think is key. But my dad, he worked in a dairy shop, his dad's dairy shop in the Lower East Side of New York. He carried a knife when he was like 13, and he was supposed to take over that dairy shop. And his dad, when his dad was sick with cancer, when my dad was 20, said, move to LA, follow your dreams as an architect. And he did. And his whole family wanted him to take over the dairy shop, and he didn't. He ignored all of that. And so he came out here with nothing. And he started at an architecture firm with 200 people. And now 30, 40 years later, he's the CEO of a 6,000 person company. And so like he put this chip on my shoulder. He wasn't a CEO while I was growing up. He was just grinding and working. But he put this chip on my shoulder growing up that was like, you got to work for everything, every single thing you got to work for. And so I was fortunate enough to have a good upbringing, but because he put this chip on my shoulder, number one, I was just like, I'm going to outwork everybody no matter what. And the other thing, he would always have me recite this, and it sounds kind of corny, but when I think back to these hard times I've gone through, I always knew this was true. He would have me recite to him like, if you set your mind to it, anything is possible. And I would just like repeat it to him. I was like, Dad, I know, I got it. But when it came to like these hard things, like I truly believe when I write it on my whiteboard and I start to think through it, I really believe I can make it happen. So I think, that on my dad's side from a business perspective is great. And my mom is just this incredibly empathetic person. Like she cares so much about everybody. She took care of us. She sacrificed her career to take care of me and my sister. And I think when you combine her incredible interpersonal sort of intangible skills of people with my dad's business and leadership, I sort of feel like this incredible gratitude that I like got these. Sometimes it's a strength and a weakness, right? Sometimes I'm so empathetic, it's hard. But I think when you combine like, the sort of like get down to business, like how do we win side from my dad and this super empathetic side from my mom, it created this sort of like how I think about things. I care about people, but I also want to win in business because I know if the business wins, it's going to help more people around the world,
No, that's amazing. And I think like the type of person that you are, you would rather lose out on a business opportunity than hurt someone else, right? Like it's like yes, you might make certain business decisions that are favor people, right? That don't necessarily favor the bottom line, but ultimately, I think you would be it would be difficult for you to reconcile if you made the other type of decision.
Yeah.
And clearly, it worked out well for you.
I mean, if there's good people, I can make it just on good people. But if it's just good business and bad people, it's like I've done it a few times and it just has never turned out well. Like doing business with good people is just like almost like a baseline. Like they have to have that, and then all of the business has to be there as well. But like, it's not fun to be in business with people that are not sort of like morally or ethically sound,
I'm 100% with you. And I think at the same time, it's also difficult, having gone through it myself as well. And I know that you have as well, is like working with people that you care about that are a wrong fit.
Yeah.
And it gets to a point where you're like, look, I love this person, but if I don't remove this person from this equation, 20 other people are going to get fucked.
Yeah. And the way it's helped me, because that's really hard as a leader when you care about someone. But the way I think about it is it's for the greater good of all of our customers out there. It's for the greater good of the rest of the team, the integrity of the business and the team. And frankly, if it's not working for the business and the team, whether the person knows it or not, there's a better opportunity out there for them where they're going to be a better fit and be happier. So it took me a while. I was young. I was 24, 25, 26 when I had to sort of learn all this. But as I've matured and learned this, like I've seen people where we had to let them go, and they're now in such a much better position, right? And I love them and I cared about them, but now they're on to some place where they truly belong and they're in that environment where they're winning, right? So, but it takes leadership and courage to make those hard decisions sometimes,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's you reminded me of a story. We ended up when we were growing our engineering team, we needed like a back-end engineer. Couldn't find anyone in Southern California. And we found a gentleman in Rhode Island and seemed like a really good fit, but he had to move his family out. And so we're like, okay, we need to like do some extra like digging to make sure, like give him tests, whatever we need to. This comes out with his whole family, moves out. 6-8 weeks in, we realized it's not a good fit. And I literally remember having to tell him this, and we tried whatever we could and it just didn't work out. It was the most difficult day. We've had clients, we've lost everything, all sorts of stuff. But the most difficult day in my career was the day where we had to lay him off. And I'll get emotional just talking about it, but thankfully he's in a much better place now, much better than if he would have stayed with us. And ultimately, like what we did, and this isn't to say like, oh, we're great people, we did this. It's not about that at all. It's just a matter of like how you deal with people. What we did is we basically said, look, we're going to give you 4 weeks notice, but what we're going to do is we're going to actively, we've got an HR department, we're going to find you a position. We found a position in 2 weeks. He went off. He's doing brilliantly now. But for me, as the leader of the organization, that was the most difficult thing I did. And the only thing that got me through it was knowing that he would land in a better place. Because imagine, it's not just one person. He moved his whole family out here.
Yeah, it's brutal. It is. I think as a leader, I think that the hardest thing by far and I think it's different for different leaders, but for my type of personality, like losing business, I can totally deal with that. That's like on me. I can deal. It's having to like look someone in the face and let them go is probably the hardest thing, but having that foresight that that if it's not working for the business, it's not working for them, whether they know it or not,
It's these difficult decisions. The whole reason I'm bringing this up is because you go through, Brandon, his journey has probably gone through 100, 200, 1,000 difficult decisions. But I think the key, if you were to ask me, and maybe Brandon will agree, is being able to make those difficult decisions as quickly as you can, because the longer they take, the more damage it can cause.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a part of it where you have to pull as much information as you can, right? And then you make the best educated decision with the information that you have. And I think for me, what's helped is in some of those, I've made wrong decisions. Absolutely. I mean, tons of them. Right. But I think like you make it, and I've made bad decisions, but I've never had any regrets. And it's because at that moment, I took all of the data that I had and I made the best possible decision. Now, whether it was right or wrong, you figure that out, you learn from it, and you move forward. And I think that's part of it, is I just like always keep moving forward. What's next? How do we learn? It's either a winning decision, great, we get all the credit, awesome, or it's not. And as long as you learn from it, you analyze what was, what didn't work, then you utilize that knowledge and that acumen in the future.
Absolutely. And I just want to comment on something JC in the comments wrote. Couldn't he have just worked for you remotely and not moved his whole family? JC, this was like in 2010 or 11, where if you want to get a sense of how different times were then, I would go to work every day with a tie on. Literally for 10 years, I wore a tie every day to work, whether I had a meeting or not. So remote work was fucking out of the question. I had to go into the office every day.
I would fly across the country for 15-minute meetings. Yeah. Now it's like, I'll do 4 of those in an hour on Zoom, and everyone's okay with it. It's just a totally different time.
But I think one of the advantages here, and we're talking about like being honest with people when you hire them, being honest with people when you have to part ways with them. Part of the challenge I think that companies had, like Liquid IV, like we did, is you only had the talent pool around you before. So you would basically sometimes have to embellish what you're doing to get the best talent, or you'd have to just deal with somebody who's kind of a partial fit. But what's happened over the last year, to Brandon's point, is you can now, within reason, like recruit people anywhere, have them work anywhere, and find really the best fit for your company, not somebody who's just down the street.
It's true. Totally. It's a whole, I mean, we're still, while I was still running the business, like we were still trying to figure out that balance, because I think there's a lot of magic that happens in person. I think collaboration, and especially on the creative side of things, like the way creative things come about is by collaboration, and an idea comes out of nowhere. And so I think there's still value in that, but there's also all these huge benefits to finding the best talent around the country or the world remote, and being able to bring them on. And there's efficiencies on both sides. So I think the way things are going to go moving forward is there's going to be this balance of both, right? You're able to take the best of both worlds, in person, remote, and really make it work.
So many of the big companies that I know that would never allow anyone to work remotely, like it would have to be like a once in a blue moon, you can work on a Friday because you've got to go to a doctor's office, are moving to exactly the model that Brandon's talking about, where they're changing their space. They're going from X number of square feet to 1/10 of that or 1/5 of that, and then going into an environment where people can come in once or twice a week, collaborate. It's like their social zone, if you will, because you want to see people in person, but at the end of the day, many people have learned to become incredibly productive at home. And it's not for everyone. I totally understand that, but that hybrid solution, I think, is going to be interesting. So Brandon, let's get back to business for a moment. So you go from doing several $100,000 in revenue in 17, 18 to exiting just a few years later. Can you talk to us about that growth? How did it happen? How did you meet Unilever? Just give us that story.
Yeah. Like I said, we built this super foundational business, which allowed for quick scale. I think a lot of businesses would struggle to scale like we did, but because we had the right partners and resources and culture and team, it allowed us to. 2019 was probably the really inflection point year where we were doing tens of millions. 2 years earlier, we were doing under $1 million, doing tens of millions. In 2019, we did this sort of celebrity investment round, which was the round that Gary came in on. And it sort of just gave us a lot of credibility that although we already had it in the product, it sort of gave us the awareness that we were maybe not lacking, but it just elevated everything a lot faster. And, a lot of our retail doors, we had incredible partnerships like with Costco and Walmart and things like that. Between that and then our direct to consumer and Amazon business really, growing as fast or faster than the in-store business. As we went into 2020 and we didn't know the pandemic was going to hit, we thought, this is probably a really sort of strategic time to maybe look for a big partner. And the reason was not necessarily to exit because of the capital reasons, but there was all these opportunities that we were getting that we didn't have the resources to take on. We couldn't grow fast enough. We were at 50 people. We'd grown a ton. And it was like, we were only in the US. We weren't even, when you have a consumer product, there's so much regulatory stuff you have to do with, with going international and things like that. And we wanted to hold it tight to what we knew, but we were getting opportunities from Canada and from Europe and from Australia and Asia. And we're like, what if we could have a partner come on, take out a lot of there was so much risk from founders and the early investors in the team. We weren't paying ourselves the right amount of, we were really, really lean. And so we thought it could be a win-win where it gives the business a chance to scale globally, be able to create a better product for the end consumer and take care of a lot of the key employees and investors who, hadn't seen any money back in 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Right. And even for me, I was living on a extremely tight, I didn't care, but it was just a tight budget just because all I cared about was the business. So at the end of 2019, we decided it might be a good time to start looking. We went through a process. I'd been getting hit up for a while. We have people always hitting us up. Hey, we'd love to talk to you about acquiring you, or different types of investment opportunities. And we just thought it was the right time. And we went through a process. It was super competitive in 2020. Just to give context on 2020, how crazy it was. We go remote in March. No idea how to run a remote business. I've only run one business and I've never done it remote. No idea how to do that and hire remote. All of our stores closed for 2 weeks. Then they reopen and everyone buys everything off the shelf, clean dry. Our DTC business is growing. And then you come into the summer, which was, for us, because, we have an extremely diverse team and it's really important to us, all the social things that were going on in the world over the summer in May, June, July with George Floyd. And that was another just really challenging, to try and lead through that in the right way and to make sure we're supporting our team in the right way. And then behind the scenes that entire time, the business is doubling our aggressive growth plan. And then behind the scenes, I'm talking to all these large, the biggest corporations in the world about potentially acquiring us that I couldn't talk about with anybody, not my friends, not my team. Wow. And so it was just the absolute perfect storm of craziness. And I think that's where sort of the calm and composure and this is my time to just be the best possible leader that I can. So fast forward to September, the business is still doing incredibly. I sort of relate to my team what we're going to be doing and why. They support us and me completely. And in October, after sort of narrowing it down, we announced that we're getting acquired by Unilever, which is sort of it's kind of like this dream as an entrepreneur. I never really knew what the exit would be or if there would be one, but you get this massive win where it's one of the first times where you actually can realize the value individually for all these people for what you've created. And so, yeah, it was a ridiculous year, but it was also so special at the same time.
Brandin, tell us about that process. So you're meeting with large corporations, obviously. You start that in 2020. How long did that process take with Unilever? And why Unilever?
It was almost a full year. It was almost a full year process. It's a long process. There's a lot of people involved in a lot of different things to check down. For us, we had some other options on the table that were maybe even for more, bigger deals, but it came down to what did we think where could Liquid IV have the best opportunity to become the biggest, best, awesome global brand? And Unilever has a lot of sustainability initiatives. And for me, that's huge. That's a big part of what I'm passionate about is the world and making sure that we leave it better than we found it. And so, finding a home where they would let us go keep doing our thing. They had the right sort of guiding principles that aligned with ours is why we ended up going with them. And yeah, it was a long process. And I feel like we found the best home for Liquid IV.
That's amazing. Brandon, a couple more questions for you, and we really appreciate your time on today. There was a question in the chat from Francisco Ortiz. When did you start taking a salary?
We started in 2012. I think I first took a salary in 2014. I paid myself $20,000 that year.
And then how did you scale that up for yourself?
I paid myself as little as I possibly could because I'd saved some money from my first job because I didn't want to hurt the business. I wanted the business to look as good as it could when we went to go raise money. Frankly, the only time I'd raise my salary was when we had to go find a really, really good high-level executive, like a COO or a CFO or a CMO, and they're getting paid a lot of money. And it would just look weird if the CEO is getting paid half of what these other leaders were getting paid. So I would always like wait until we were about to hire a really high-level executive, and then I'd bump mine to like $5,000 above that, just so when people looked at our investors looked at our salary table, like it didn't look weird that I was like paying myself half of all these other people.
That's brilliant. I think that a lot of people, and I'm sure you've seen these sorts of investor decks as well, is they just bloat themselves. Like you look at it and you're like, okay, they're like, we need 6 months runway, we're raising X, and you look at it and most of the money is going to salaries, which isn't an issue necessarily, but it's like you've got to look at Brandon's story. Like you've got to invest your time if you want other people to invest their money at a certain point, right? Especially when you're starting out. Brandon, give us what are the 3 best lessons you learned over the last 10 years?
3 best. Wow, that's a lot. I got to come up with one to start.
Give us one.
Yeah.
And we'll go from there.
Oh man, 3 best lessons I learned. I think one is that, and I think you and Gary talked about it today, which is like, you can have the like best business strategy or product or any of these things, and truly it comes down to people and relationships. Like it's not like you can have a bad business and just have great relationships, because that won't work either. But you can have a great idea, and like Gary will tell you, like when we were working together, there were a couple of times where things weren't going as good as they needed to be, or even me and you, right? And I would pick up the phone, and the reason that I did that was because I knew that whether it was in that moment or 3 years from now, like that relationship was going to be really, really important. So like just not burning bridges, and like you never know when there's a relationship that's gonna be important. I think that's why you asked the question about big box versus DTC. It's because for the first few years out of school for me, and it wasn't like some like intentional motivation I had it was just these genuine relationships I built with people who I was super curious about they were doing, or how they were running their business, or what they were doing. And then when the time came where we were looking for investors, or we needed a DTC partner, or whatever it was, I was able to call them and say, hey, I got this great idea. Not going to burden you with it, but I think this could be valuable for you too. Always adding value to the other person, right? Like I think what I've noticed lately is I have so many entrepreneurs reach out to me now, and I love investing and helping, but a lot of them are just like, they don't bring value to the like they want to energy suck you. And I think when I look back on how I was like, how did I get all these awesome people to get involved? I always came to them with like, how is this going to bring value for you? Like, this is why I think this is a good investment for you, or why I think we should do this partnership. And so probably the thing that I would hang my hat on is like that relationships are just so key.
And I think you're spot on with value. I think it's something that's often missed. Like people want to create a product that provides value to the consumer, but then they don't provide organizationally enough value for their employees. They don't provide value within their ecosystem. And I think you're spot on that. And it cannot be understated, or overstated rather, how important it is to continually create new value and not transfer that value, and make sure that everybody that you're touching is getting something in return. And it's not just a energy suck, or like, I want this from you and I'm not going to give you anything back, but it's reciprocal. And in your case, you were able to give so much value to your employees and vendors and whatnot, that they wanted to go to bat for you. They wanted you to win ultimately. And so they wanted you to win. They wanted the consumer to win, everybody, right?
It's so
not
true.
a zero-sum game. We keep talking about this.
It's 360 too, because you can't, like, I think some people think it's just provide value to the consumer, which you absolutely have to do. But like, if you don't have the team who, we always talked about life value. I wanted to add life value. So yeah, salary is important or culture is important, but like at the end, people wanted to come work for Liquid IV because it was like this cool culture. We paid well. And like, it was cool to work at Liquid IV because we had built this culture of winning and accountability and all these things. Like, without the team behind the scenes who are going to go to bat and go to war with me in these hard times, you can't provide the value to consumer. But like, you got to be providing the value to consumer. You got to be providing value to investors. And so like, I think that's what's so interesting when people think of CEOs or entrepreneurs. It's like, they're like, oh, you create your own schedule. It's like about you. It's actually the opposite. All I was ever thinking about was all these different constituents, whether it's investors or team or consumers or retailers, right? Like, if you are providing value for all of them, your business will succeed. But if you're thinking about yourself in that situation, it's just like, that's the thing. Frankly, for 10 years, I sacrificed myself for that. And I think that's what I'm excited for sort of post-acquisition, is to like focus on like getting healthy and doing some things that I just completely blocked out for the last 10 years of my life.
Yeah. But the irony is that you focused on everyone else, and in return, because it was authentic and genuine, they focused on you and they made you a better person.
Yep.
It's all about that focus. Brandon, tell us what you're up to now.
Yeah. I sort of just stepped away a few weeks ago. It was a hard decision, but I think in totality, it made so much sense, right? Like, my team is now in a great spot to carry on this business. We built all the foundational pieces they need. Unilever, I've sort of passed on the secret sauce to them so they can go keep doing it. And frankly, for me, I didn't really realize this because I'd only started one business, but like, I'm just like, at heart, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an innovator. Like, I want to think, I'm like outside the box thinking of, I have, things with sustainability, renewable energy. So it was sort of like, if my mission, maybe or don't, but it's called Change the World, like CTW. And it means like helping people everywhere live better lives for generations to come. And when I use that as my decision point, like, Unilever now can go take this brand and make it a $10 billion global business, right? My team is now in a spot to either keep running it at Live or have opportunities elsewhere, because everyone wants a piece of our team now. And now I, in my sweet spot from an efficiency standpoint, me being in that wouldn't have been most efficient, I can go create other products and services that are going to add value to the world. So it was a tough decision. It's like walking away from, like, I'm sure when parents send their kids to college or something, like, I don't have kids yet, but I'm sure it's like that. Like, I spent 10 years of my life building it, and it was just like time to set it free. And now I have some sort of big things I can't really talk about that I'm working on, starting to get going. And in the meantime, I'm just I'm trying to take a deep breath, because I'm a go kind of person. And just like, I've taken the last month to just reflect on sort of what the last 10 years was, our community that we built, the 80 people who, made life-changing wealth from this deal, and just like take a deep breath and sort of audit myself and where I want to go moving forward. Because it would be really easy to jump into something fast. There's a couple things going on. And so, yeah, I'm just sort of taking a deep breath right now. I'm sure it won't last that long. I'm trying to like be as patient as possible, but I'm really, I've never been more excited and motivated for this next phase. I have resources that I never had before. Like, most importantly is just the relationships. Like, I can call you, I can call Gary, I can call my distribution partners or my suppliers or my celebrity investors. They all are like, hey, what's next? I'm in. What's next? I'm in. So I think that's one of the most valuable things, because of that credibility now. And then obviously the financial piece, like, I had zero to my name, and now I have something where when I'm ready to go, I can really put some fuel in the engine.
Brandon, you're amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thanks for being such an inspiration to so many people. I think that I really enjoyed this. I know that the audience enjoyed it based on the comments, and I can't wait to read your book when you write it.
Thanks so much, man. It was really fun being on. I appreciate you having me, and yeah, I'm really grateful.
Thanks, bro. See you.
All right. See ya.